Hello, everybody. It is Phoenix bringing you guys another episode of All Talk Wrestling Top 10 Countdown. And today we are going to be doing part 2 of our 3-part series of the greatest match on every WrestleMania card from WrestleManias 1 through 30. Now, if you guys remember, last week we did WrestleMania 1 through 12. So this week, we're going to be doing WrestleManias 13 through 24. If you guys didn't get an opportunity to check out the last video, I will link that video to this description so you can go back and give it a look. Even if you just want to kind of refresh yourself on what everything that I had picked was. So this is just going to be the follow-up to that previous video. We kind of know what the rules and regulations are. We kind of know what the introduction on how I do my videos and all that other stuff is. So I'm not going to get into that. This is going to be a lot shorter of a video, and I'm just going to go through every match that I believe, or every pay-per-view that I believe that was the best, and what was the best match on that card as well for WrestleMania. Sorry for the tongue tie. Just excited to go ahead and get this list done. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get this countdown started. For WrestleMania 13, we have Bret Hart versus Stone Cold Steve Austin in a submission match. Okay, so I did have an idea of honorably mentioning Psycho Sid versus The Undertaker for the WWE Championship, but I mean, I'm an Undertaker fan. I have no problem admitting that match was a little bit slow pace. It was a little boring, so I can't put it up there. But this match, Bret Hart versus Stone Cold Steve Austin, submission match, was the greatest match of that WrestleMania, period, point blank. It's really known for the infamous double turn where Stone Cold went as the heel and Bret Hart went out as the face. And at the end of the match, Stone Cold came out as the face, Bret Hart came out as the heel. It's actually one of the best moves that's ever happened in wrestling history. It's the thing that kind of gave us the Stone Cold of the Attitude Era that would eventually spearhead WWE into the position that it was in at that time. So while the match was good, the end result that came from that match was necessary to the history of wrestling. Got no problem putting it as the best match of WrestleMania 13. Coming in for WrestleMania 14, we have Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Shawn Michaels for the WWE Championship. Now, while I feel like this was the best match on the card, I do want to go ahead and give an honorable mention to The Undertaker versus Kane for their one-on-one match that they had. I mean, just the storytelling alone could have put that match at number 1. But because of how things transpired the year before and how Stone Cold was built up to eventually dethrone Shawn Michaels, I mean, that was the best match that we had. It was really well put together. Shawn Michaels did the right thing, did the best thing by putting Stone Cold over. At the end of that match, I really appreciated it. If I had to go back, those are the main 2 matches that I go back and watch. But if I had to choose between any of them, Austin and HBK, that's the match that stole WrestleMania 14 for me. So that's the best match. And the thing that we're going to realize is as we get down this list, it's going to be a lot more honorable mentions than there were 1 through 10. So be on the lookout for that. Coming in for WrestleMania 15, we have The Rock versus Stone Cold Steve Austin and WWE Championship match with no disqualification. So kind of going down that entire card for WrestleMania 15, I mean, you could probably make an argument that the Big Show versus Mankind to see who was special guest referee this match would have been a good one, but I don't know. Like, I look at this card and there's not too much on there that makes me think that there's much of an honorable mention. So The Rock versus Stone Cold, headlining a trilogy of WrestleMania rivalry matches that they would have, was definitely the best match on this card. Stone Cold defeated The Rock, became the WWF champion. So best match of that year's WrestleMania, bar none. I have no problem putting that on my countdown. Coming in for WrestleMania 16, we have Edge and Christian versus the Dudley Boyz versus the Hardy Boyz in a triangle ladder match for the World Tag Team Championships. So for this particular WrestleMania, the ladder match that happened between the Hardys, Edge and Christian, and the Dudleys was by a mile the best match on the card. The only match that I think that kind of measured up to it in a sense was the two falls match between Kurt Angle, Chris Benoit, and Chris Jericho for the Intercontinental and European Championship. So that's my honorable mention match. But my God, those ladder matches between the Hardys, the Dudleys, and the ENC, the Attitude Big Three, were definitely before their time. They kind of are the reason that we have the type of matches that we have right now. It's all spearheaded by this type of tag team match, and by a mile, to me, that was the best match of WrestleMania 16 or WrestleMania 2000, whatever you want to call it. For WrestleMania 17, and this was a please don't make me choose, we have TLC between the Dudley Boyz, the Hardy Boyz, and Edge and Christian. Honestly, this entire card could be an honorable mention. This is by a mile the greatest WrestleMania of all time. So having to pick what I believe was the best match was more of a chore than putting this entire list together just for this one pay-per-view. Even with the honorable mentions, I mean, Vince McMahon versus Shane McMahon in the street fight, that alone could have easily been the best match just because of the storytelling. The Rock and Stone Cold in the no disqualification match for the WWF Championship, where The Rock was brutalized by Vince McMahon and Stone Cold. I don't know. Even Triple H and The Undertaker kind of took the cake with their match. Like, it was really hard selecting one, but the legacy of the TLC match is mainly the reason why I have to put it as the best match of WrestleMania 17. Again, this is the only one that I feel like there may not be a right answer to it. So, but I'll go ahead and give it just to those three teams, those six competitors put on the best match of the night for WrestleMania 17. Coming in for WrestleMania 18, we have The Rock versus Hulk Hogan. So the tagline for, I believe it was the Great One versus the Icon, was the Legend versus the Icon, one of those two things. But my God, did that match not live up to the hype in the senses of getting to see two competitors that we never thought we'd have an opportunity to see face each other in the ring, was 100% worth the billing to make that the match of the night. There really weren't too many other matches that I could follow and say, hey, it gets an honorable mention. I think that the Undisputed Championship match between Triple H and Chris Jericho, sadly, that match was more about Stephanie and Triple H than it was about Chris Jericho and Triple H. But, I mean, it was a good match. The rest of the card was kind of okay. I enjoyed the Undertaker and Ric Flair match. Stone Cold and Scott Hall put on a pretty good match as well. But when I have to look down that entire card, The Rock versus Hulk Hogan was definitely the match of the night. Coming in for WrestleMania 19, we have Brock Lesnar versus Kurt Angle for the WWE Championship. I was this close, literally this close to putting Shawn Michaels versus Chris Jericho as the best match of that night. It arguably could have been, but Kurt Angle and Brock Lesnar put on a hell of a match. They put on an absolute clinic. So I'm not even going to deny them their spot for the best match of that year's WrestleMania. Shawn Michaels and Chris Jericho, they definitely get the honorable mention for that particular card. I feel like whenever you put those two together, they're always going to give you some fireworks. But I feel the same way with Brock Lesnar and Kurt Angle. I mean, everything about that match was just spectacular, including the finish. Brock Lesnar hitting that goddamn shooting star press and almost killing himself. I mean, man, I remember that vividly. So that's arguably one of the greatest matches I've ever seen at WrestleMania. So definitely good to get the top spot for WrestleMania 19. For WrestleMania 20, we have Triple H versus Chris Benoit versus Shawn Michaels, triple threat for the World Heavyweight Championship. So the honorable mention that I'm going to give to this pay-per-view is Kurt Angle versus Eddie Guerrero for the WWE Championship. Both of these matches were absolute bangers, and either one of them could have been the best match on that card, in my personal opinion. But for this one, I'm going to have to give it to the Game, the Crippler, and the Heartbreak Kid. I mean, All three of them worked very well, with Triple H and Shawn Michaels' ongoing rivalry to Chris Benoit kind of having his ascension to the top of the card in the WWE. I mean, everything about that match just screamed excellence. Everything about that match just screamed greatness. So I have no problem with putting that as the best match for that year's WrestleMania, with the Kurt Angle versus Eddie Guerrero match slightly following behind that. So definitely the best match of the night. Coming in for WrestleMania 21, we have the men's Money in the Bank ladder match featuring Edge, Chris Benoit, Chris Jericho, Christian, Kane, and Shelton Benjamin. So two matches could have potentially overtaken this match on the card, and that was Undertaker versus Randy Orton, and my God, Kurt Angle versus Shawn Michaels. I mean, it's almost ludicrous that I'm not putting that one as number one, but I feel like the Money in the Bank ladder match, with that being the first ever Money in the Bank ladder match in the WWE, and just the excitement that we had behind that entire match was just amazing. I had no problem with Edge winning. He obviously kind of gave the blueprint on how to be the WWE champion, or the Money in the Bank holder, and everybody afterwards followed suit with him. So that's just another notch to his legacy. But to me, that was the best match on the WrestleMania 21 card. Coming in for WrestleMania 22, we have Edge versus Mick Foley in a hardcore match. Now, it's really hard to have picked that match over some of the other ones that we have, including Mickie James, Trish Stratus, or even Triple H versus John Cena. But I feel like this was the best match. It was the most memorable match for me for that particular WrestleMania. Everything about it was really good. I didn't think that Edge and Mick Foley would be able to pull off such a legendary match. But if you ever go back to that particular WrestleMania, the one match that you remember more than anything else, or maybe it's just me, was the hardcore match between these two. I mean, everything, including the spot with the spear on the burning table, was just epic, man. Like, I don't know. So I'll definitely give that one the nod as the best match on the WrestleMania 22 card. Coming in for WrestleMania 23, we have John Cena versus Shawn Michaels for the WWE Championship. Now, the honorable mention I'm going to give for this year's WrestleMania is going to go to the Money in the Bank ladder match between Mr. Kennedy, CM Punk, Edge, Jeff Hardy, and King Booker, Randy Orton, and Matt Hardy. So that was actually a really good match as well. I don't think that it was as good as the match that preceded it a few years beforehand. But yeah, this was 100% the best match that we had on this WrestleMania card. Had no issue with it at all. So Shawn Michaels and John Cena surprisingly have really good chemistry together, and I think that John Cena's main event match that year was better than the year before against Triple H. The only difference is I think Shawn Michaels should have won against John Cena and captured the WWE Championship, but I'm not a booker, so I can't say anything. But for what it's worth, the match was still good. I don't agree with the outcome, but yeah, definitely the match of the night. And finally, for WrestleMania 24, we have Edge versus The Undertaker for the World Heavyweight Championship. Now, I know that was the same pay-per-view that took place with Shawn Michaels versus Ric Flair in the retirement match, and it wasn't easy to be able to put this one above that one. I think that was arguably the most emotional match, which could have very well indeed made it the best match on the card. But there was just something about the storyline between The Undertaker and Edge that kind of made that match really good. I mean, they've always worked really well together. Maybe it was not the most enjoyable match. I kind of enjoyed the Big Show versus Floyd Mayweather match. I mean, that was really fun, but it's not an honorable mention. But yeah, the best match for the WrestleMania 24 card goes to Taker and Edge. They put on a hell of a match for the World Heavyweight Championship. Got no problem putting it exactly where it is. So that gets the top spot for that year's WrestleMania. And that's going to be it for my list. Tell me what you guys think. Make sure you guys leave a like and a comment on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you already haven't. So next week, I'm going to be doing the last part of this trilogy where I'm going to be giving you guys WrestleManias 25 through 36 and what I believe was the best match and the potential honorable mentions on all of those cards. It's getting a lot harder now that I'm doing these lists, but again, I think that it's a lot of fun, and I hope that you guys are enjoying watching the videos as much as I'm enjoying making them for you. Thank you guys again for taking the time to watch this video with me. You guys have a good rest of your evening, and I'll see you soon.